How are you feeling?
Excited, definitely humbled by the amount of support that I had throughout the campaign, and definitely through the results, but also excited about the future of not only our department, but the future of this community, and how we're going to be able to work together through some of the issues, and celebrate some of the successes, and just represent this, not only this community, but my office.
So let's talk about it. You know, we mentioned the fact that, you know, this is a mail-in ballot. So it was just a week ago, last Monday, where, I mean, all the, you know, most of the ballots were counted. You were up, I believe, almost 8,000 votes. So you recently just got the news.
Right. So election night, the numbers looked good, and then through the updates that our elections department here put out, the results were staying pretty consistent. But definitely on Monday, having the updates to the point where it was officially called was a pretty exciting day for, you know, just like I said, we worked really hard on the campaign, and to have it be official, it was a great time for me personally.
As the first woman, you've broken so many barriers. First woman sheriff, also you're the first openly gay sheriff in California. And that's not the first for you, is it? You've done so much. You've been with this agency for 28 years. Can you tell us more about your history?
Yeah, so I grew up in Nevada City, which is a small community here in Nevada County. Born and raised in this community. Always have loved how welcoming this community has been to me and my family. My father was in law enforcement here, did several of 29 years himself as a law enforcement officer in Nevada County and the city of Nevada City. And so when I started, it was a new adventure. I was pretty naive. I was 22 years old, but you know, recognizing how important a calling of law enforcement is, and just, you know, having opportunity after opportunity. Worked real hard. Like I said, did make some promotions along the way that were groundbreaking. First female sergeant, lieutenant, and captain in our agency's history. Very honored to have made those accomplishments, but along the way it was because of a lot of really good support from people inside my department, people, you know, law enforcement officers in this community for other agencies and statewide. So that's, you know, that's the part where I say I need to respect what they've done for me, and make sure that I represent not only our office but our community as well.
That's right. Almost 3 decades. I mean, along the way, you've mentioned in the past that you've had mentors, but how has it been for you, being that this is a male-dominated field? What's the journey been like for you?
Well, you know, it's about teamwork. And I've always, in high school and growing up in teamwork, team sports were always what I was drawn to, and the ability to really rely on others and have people rely on you. And coming into law enforcement, it was very similar. So it was natural for me to want to stay inside this kind of male-dominated profession, but also knowing I wasn't going to change it. It was the position that I went into, knowing that it was male-dominated. So I always looked at it as my parents have always said, just you be you, and you know, good things will happen if you know, treat people with respect, without judgment. And that's what's happened in the last 28 years. Most of the mentors here in the department have been men, clearly, because that's what we've had. But I've also been able to reach out to other agencies in the Valley in Sacramento, and had some great mentors, female mentors in law enforcement, that have really allowed me to grow with them in their own accomplishments. So it's a nice blend, but definitely without the support of a lot of the male officers that I've had growing up in this organization, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to even think that I would be qualified to run at this agency.
So in the past, you've talked about biases and blessings. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when I first started, it was definitely a different time. When we look at the early '90s, it was culturally it was different. Growing up in being in this local community was a little bit different back then in the '90s, and as culturally as we've become more diverse, the departments become more diverse, and I think that has blended into really a law enforcement agency that can look at people equally. And but definitely in the early days it was a little more difficult. But there was still a lot of folks that absolutely did respect me and showed me the way and said didn't really care if I was a woman. I have been openly gay since I was in high school. I've always just been me, and that piece of the blessing of just being authentic and being true to who I am, I think leads people to a position where good confidence and good relationships, and that it is mutually respectful without judgment.
Did you feel the support of Nevada County residents, being openly gay? Did you feel that support, when you were campaigning, or was it the opposite? What did you see out there?
No, absolutely, I felt the support. Along the path, my wife, Amy, was with me, my kids were with me, people supported us. I introduced Amy to all the new folks that I was meeting along the trail. And most people, when you get to know my wife, you get to know she's pretty dynamic herself. She's a deputy probation officer here in our community. She's just as capable of any other person that I've ever worked with in law enforcement. So that piece was great to feel that support of this community. Nevada County is a special place, and I said it a lot of times on the campaign trail. People have choices where you live, and if you're fortunate enough to have been born and raised in this community, we see a lot of folks that stay, but there's a lot of folks that move here for that special feeling that we have. Can be very passionate about their viewpoints, but always respectful, and I think that's what leads us to being able to collaborate and being able to really provide not only the best government services for folks that live here, but the nonprofit organizations that thrive in this community because of volunteerism. It just shows you that people do care for one another. And on the campaign trail, I saw that daily on no matter if we had different viewpoints or folks would have different viewpoints, we could all agree that everybody really had a desire to feel safe in their community.
Was it ever like a topic that really came up, or was that like not even, it doesn't even matter, like as it shouldn't? The fact that you're openly gay, was that something in the campaign trail that kept coming up, or was it just something that no?
It didn't, and I think that's what's nice about not just the diversity of our community, but where we are, I think, culturally. And that's, I always looked at it as it's just a part of me, and we didn't see a lot of other folks that were maybe heterosexual be asked about anything, and it as I've said, it's just about who I am. I knew going into this campaign that it might be brought up, but it was also specific. It was, if you don't want to vote for me because of that, that's your choice, and I'm not going to change because of that, because I am who I am, and that resonated with a lot of our residents.
Well said, and I agree. I think that's something that really shouldn't be brought up because it doesn't matter. Just like you mentioned, it's not like we're asking, hey, what's your sexual orientation if they're heterosexual. That it doesn't matter. But I think for a lot of people, especially being that you are the first sheriff in the state of California, I think a lot of people admire you for everything you've been through, and obviously for being, open about that. What message would you have for them?
Just be authentic. Be who you are, and being a woman in law enforcement, I think is the same I look at it the same as it doesn't really matter if you're a male or a female doing this job. We definitely, we're wired differently, so we police differently, we supervise differently, manage differently, just because we're different. But the reality of it is if you're an imposter, if you're trying to be something you're not going to do your best. And being a woman in law enforcement, initially it was you wanted to act like one of the guys or be one of the guys. And the reality of it is you're never going to be one of the guys. It's just impossible. So be you. And I was able to live that way basically because of the upbringing from my parents. I'm a product of amazing parenting and unconditional love in our home, and just a respect of be who you are. And that helped me throughout my career in dealing with law enforcement services and police services, whether it was taking a report from a victim or taking a statement from a suspect, is always being true to who I am, and with a goal of making a safe environment for our community, and really the fact of being the first, someone's got to be the first. And I've been the first in a lot of different categories, and it was never my goal to go out and be the first, it was just my goal to be me. And when, definitely working in this amazing organization that has provided so much opportunities for me, it was, to be able to campaign to be the sheriff was an amazing journey. I'm a journey person, I'm not an end result person. So the journey really was an amazing place to enjoy meeting new people, reconnecting with old friends along the way, and trying to showcase really the amazing work that we do at this office, and looking at ways for the future of what we can do better.
What prompted you to want to run for sheriff?
It was a culmination of a couple of things. The reality of our current sheriff retiring. I worked for our current sheriff, Keith Royal, for 20 years. 8 years prior to that was for 3 other sheriffs. So it was, when he decided to retire, knowing that I wanted to, and I've always spent my career trying to do the best services that we can, no matter which division I've worked in, looking at it from the higher position of running the organization, really did get back to my roots of why I'm a law enforcement officer. I want to be part of the solutions for issues and challenges, and looking at how we can do things better. And nationally it can be challenging with the political arena of
Right.
relationships that I think law enforcement have had with their communities, and knowing how much I respect this community, and really wanting to make sure that we never get into that position of having a us versus them relationship, and seeing day to day from the inside the excellent work that we do, and wanting to make sure that we showcase that more, and communicate that more with the public, I think was another deciding factor. Looking at
Do you have any specific goals that you want to reach as a sheriff?
Yeah, the idea of putting together a strategic plan for the office. We have 170 employees here at the sheriff's office, and really just empowering not only our executive staff, but our supervisory staff and our line staff into what we would like to see for the future of our agency, and how we can better look at being proactive in prevention. I think is an important goal for me, in that putting a plan together and codifying that plan so that we can be accountable to each other and accountable to the public on really what it is for the future that we're looking at accomplishing. That's definitely the #1 goal right off the bat, is to get a strategic plan written and in place so that we can all as an entire group, work towards the same goals.
And can we talk about issues and challenges? What are some of those issues and challenges that you currently face right now?
I'd say, just as in all communities right now, with our affordable housing and issues, sometimes with mental health challenges, is our homelessness issues, and we're not alone in that category. Up and down the state, we've lots of agencies are trying to do their best for solutions for homelessness. So, and we need to do better at that. We need to work more collaboratively with our not only our county government, but our city government, and our looking at other departments in our health and human services and our behavioral health specialists in trying to really get more of a coordinated entry for folks that need assistance. In law enforcement, we're the first responders, so we see a lot, and we're called to a lot of incidences that not several years ago it would have never been a call for service for us. But now when it seems like a lot of the community, when you see someone out and about, will get a call for service for that, even though they're not necessarily committing any crimes. So when we're out there and we see things, we should be able to be part of the solution.
And again, it kind of goes back to the, us versus them, trying to kind of squash that, making sure that the community is united and with law enforcement as well as residents out there.
Right, and I think that that piece is, can be shared along any issue, not necessarily just homelessness. Yeah. With the changing laws with cannabis, we are a grow county because of our environmental, and our weather and our grow seasons here in Nevada County, and just making sure that we're protecting the safety of our citizens and our visitors that come here, and making sure that it's a plan. It's not just because the law changes, we need to plan for what those changes mean for us. And moving forward, when issues are no longer crimes, shifting our resources so that we are shifted with that, I think is critical, so that we can allow folks that want to come into compliance. But there's a heck of a lot of folks out there that are not in that category that we need to pay particular attention to, because those are the ones that are dangerous. And we've seen it across the North State with some very violent crimes, and that's not what we want to entice, and that's definitely not what we want for our citizens here in Nevada County, is to have that fear of a violent crime because of unregulated cannabis.
So you could say, so is it fair to say three things: homelessness, obviously cannabis, and putting a plan together? I mean, all of this kind of under this plan. And the third one would be cannabis, homelessness, and just preparedness.
Preparedness, one of our priorities here, and again, we see the tragedies in Butte County with wildland fire. Yeah. And a lot of that can be connected with your homelessness issue, with a wildfire issue. We can learn from other agencies and how they've responded, but we as a county need to prepare our community for the event of a wildland fire incident like what we've seen recently. And part of that is, that when we're looking at the sheriff's office, we're looking at leadership on evacuation plans and how do we communicate with the public. That's a big piece moving forward on the challenge. The solutions are collaboration. The solutions are assuring that we know we're in the position really to provide that leadership and work together with not only our Office of Emergency Services here in the county, but our transportation departments, our Health and Human Services, to really be able to work an event like that. But if we can prevent, just like with crime, if we can prevent, if we can spend a lot of our energy on the front end, then, to me that shows our citizens how much, how important it is that we look at their safety.
And as you mentioned, with prevention, also having that mentality of us versus them with law enforcement. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier with the climate, or with deputies or officers, against people, residents. How do you begin to kind of make sure that never happens? You know what I mean? You mentioned that you never want to be in that situation, and that seems to be one of your goals, that making sure that never happens here. How do you work towards that? How do you work to prevent that?
Well, I think it starts from the top, through the leadership of our office, on making sure that we treat everyone with respect, that we hire the right people, that we definitely promote the right people, that understand their role in providing law enforcement services. And then, being transparent, having that, I talked a lot about it on the campaign trail of, during the campaign, a lot of people had an ability to voice their concerns or their complaints. And we shouldn't only do that every 4 years during a campaign cycle. We should really listen to the community, because that's our service. That's who we provide our services to. So having the ability for either town halls or a way in which the community can address their concerns, and being open about it and transparent about what services we did provide. And as I've said, our office does a lot of amazing work. We have a lot of amazing employees that truly do have a passion for service. And once we can combine the two with providing that transparency and the communication piece, and give people the ability to voice a concern, I think makes that relationship that much stronger. So that when we do have potential challenges down the road, it's more of a trusted relationship. Those are the things that can change immediately. Those are the things that we already see in a lot of the staff and a lot of the relationship that we already have here. It's still a small town.
Will you be providing like any extra training or asking for any of that?
Yeah, I mean, the training budget, when we look at the overall training, instead of looking at minimum standards, we need to look at standards of excellence, so that our staff really are prepared.
So you will require like additional training?
Some additional training, definitely more of the communication with all of our staff. We have an entire division in corrections that, sometimes in police departments, that's not what you think of, because that's not police work. But that's a big portion of the function of the sheriff's office. And making sure that our correctional staff are trained, making sure that we're up to our staffing levels are looked at and surveyed as to what's the safest for the care and custody of the people that we have incarcerated, and our staff. All of those things together, which is part of a strategic plan, a division, a goal of my strategic plan would be on personnel, and making sure that we support the personnel that we have, helps with that relationship key to relationships for trust.
So 3 decades, you've been doing this for 3 decades, working with the agency. What's a lesson that you've learned throughout, in that time that you're bringing along in this position now?
Just definitely, you don't just show up and have, the job. You have to earn it every single day. And, the abilities for me in the promotions that I've had, and it was not because I arrived, it was because I got a new opportunity, and there was things to learn, things to look at, process to how we can do it better, but always knowing that I asked for the opportunity, and there was a lot of work involved with it. So that's the key, I think, is always looking at what you can do, and how you can become part of the solution.
I know you're just starting off. You're not, you won't even be actually in office until January, I understand. But how do you want people to know you? How do you want people to describe you when they talk about the sheriff of Nevada County?
Definitely that I'm authentic. I am who I am. I'm one of the hardest workers. And when I ask my staff, who do you think the hardest worker in our organization is? And they sit back and they think, I always want them to think that it's them. And if you work for me, that's my expectation, is to work real hard, understand that we have very important roles in this community, in public safety, that I've never arrived to a position without a lot of help along the way, and willing to help whoever's coming up next. I think that's the idea of success, is making sure that you have people around you that are just as successful, and being transparent with what it is that we're trying to do.
Perfect. Is there a message that you would want to send to your residents of Nevada County now?
Just extremely thankful and honored to represent this amazing organization and this community in public safety in the state of California. It's 28 years. I've learned a lot along the way. Every day was always a training day for me. It was never something that I took for granted. And one of the things my father said to me when I first started in law enforcement was, go for the positions that you really want to work. Don't just go for the ones that you think the office wants you to go for, because he recognized that in a blink of an eye your career's over, and you never know exactly what it is. That if you wanted to do something, make sure that you go for it. And I put in for a lot of different positions, and I was fortunate enough to get them. So just letting the community know I'm honored, I'm excited, I'm definitely going to be out there and listening more than I am going to be talking. And I look forward to definitely the next 4 years of providing the best public service to this community.
That's awesome. How's your dad doing? I understand he was in the ER recently. Yeah,
he just a few days before the general election, he decided to have a gallbladder incident. So he's 81. So anytime you have surgery when you're in your 80s, it was a little it wasn't touch and go as far as his health. It was just a lot of anxiety and well wishes, and our family rallied around him. We're a very tight-knit family. I've got a brother and 2 sisters. My parents have been married for, I want to say, 62 years. So they, it was difficult, but he went through his surgery great. Sat down with them clearly over the Thanksgiving holiday and yesterday, and just making sure that he's doing what his doctors ordered, and he is. He's a good patient, and the swearing-in ceremony will be January 7th. So that's the goal, that I try to make sure that he knows he's got to be up and around and ready to go through the ceremony with us.
Yeah. And do you mind if we ask you maybe some personal questions? Sure. I understand you've been married since 2014. Okay. And you mentioned children earlier?
Yeah, so I've got 3 stepdaughters. Katie's 24, Mallory's 18, and Abby's 12. My middle child, Mallory, is going to Chico State, and they got evacuated over the fires in Butte. So we've had Mallory home for the last couple of weeks, so that was very nice to be able to have her back at home. She's doing fantastic. They helped out on the campaign. They were at events. They were in the parades with us. They were, doing a lot of the paperwork. We had them doing stuffing envelopes and different things like that. Very fortunate that they were very supportive throughout the process, because it was the change of not being around and not having. Amy was with me for most of my events, so it really took its toll on time for the family. But they were all great about supporting. So.
And so I do understand Amy is a probation officer, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So what's that going to be like now?
Yeah. You know, she's very good at what she does. She's extremely compassionate, but when you meet her, you definitely know she means business. She's the accountability person. If you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, and she helps people through that process that are sentenced. And it's, you know, I've got a great working relationship with the probation department. Chief Ortola, her chief. You know, I'm hoping to collaborate a little bit more with some programming for our in-custody inmates. So I just see it as a positive.
Any changes that you plan to implement in the agency?
You know, right off the gate, it's going to be more of a learning. Don't want to change things just to make a change. I want to be strategic in the changing. There's a few things right off the gate. When I talk about prevention, we need to do a little bit better with our youth, and maybe a youth services unit. We currently have 2 school resource officers for our entire county. So I'd like to maybe combine the school resource officers with more of a youth services unit where we can be more preventative, where we can look at interaction with our youth before we get into a criminal justice system. And that takes making sure that we have the right people on board and the right program set up and collaborating with our police departments. Our Grass Valley, Nevada City, and Truckee police departments do fantastic jobs at doing some of that proactive work, and I'd like to be a partner with them in that. You know, other than that, it's going to be looking at the budget. We're in budget cycle right now for next fiscal year. So sitting down with the sheriff and our chief financial officer and really going over, you know, what's expected and what we can do with the allotted money that we have and look at those priorities. But as far as changes right out the gate, we're going to change some letterhead. We're going to change some documents. But as far as the bigger picture, this is the organization that I've worked with for 28 years. So there's not going to be, you know, a lot of people have asked, are you going to change the badge or the patch or certain things? It's not necessarily on the priority list for right now. I'm looking at, we need to fill our full-time positions that we have open with qualified and good candidates. So more on the recruitment end for right away.
How has law enforcement changed, you know, from the moment you started to now?
Well, I think you know, when we look at the national level, we've seen some use of force, questionable use of force. So there's a higher level of expectation, I think, and with more of the social media aspect and you know, the accessibility, I think, for a lot of agencies, definitely smaller agencies, is making sure that we stay in front of incidents and we discuss them and we make comments and we educate the public and we talk about incidents that happen. I think that has changed. I think the idea of you know, the viewpoint on criminal justice sometimes shifts. And right now we're seeing a very rehabilitative kind of viewpoint instead of incarceration or a punitive system, with the shift in where we house some of our convicted individuals and that realignment of going away from state prisons and having our incarcerated folks stay here within the county. Those definitely have shifted to where we need to provide better programs for our incarcerated population so that when we have, you know, 4 or 5, even up to 10-year sentences at the county level, that we are providing some type of reentry programming for our incarcerated population. Whereas before it was, you got your conviction for your felony and off the person went to state prison. Those things, when the laws shift like that, we need to prepare and plan and strategize on how we can do things based off of the law. A lot of the on the campaign trail, there were a lot of questions about personal viewpoints, and the reality of it is clearly the legislature creates the law, and the law enforcement it doesn't create the law, we enforce the law. But looking at the bigger picture, in a smaller community, just the community's expectation of doing more, even though it may not be a crime, and having staff that are able to handle calls for service with folks that may have not committed crimes but are in crisis. And how do we better prepare our staff for that? And how do we collaborate better with our service agencies so that we can get someone the service that they need without having to incarcerate and not waiting for a crime to be committed. I think that's an important piece for our communities in really assuring that our very limited resources are used efficiently.
When we talked about cannabis and you're talking about planning, do we need like rules? Is that what we're talking about, like rules for growers? Like what exactly are you talking about?
Yeah, so the state, with the state law changes, and then at our local level, our County Board of Supervisors creating their own ordinance on based off of land use and zoning on where it's legal to grow, making sure that we're educating the public on that so that they understand sometimes the very complicated rules on being compliant, making sure that our staff are aware of what those rules are so that we can enforce the rules of the ordinances, but also looking at collaboratively with our partners in code enforcement that do a lot of the enforcement of code, which is what our grow ordinance is. And just making sure that we're all at the table together so that we provide a safe service for the staff that are enforcing and for the community through the education, and then them understanding the process, I think is important. Right. For specifically for cannabis. The city of Nevada City, which is its own, has its own political boundaries within our community, they're progressing with lots of, they just agreed to a adult use dispensary for the city of Nevada City. And what does that do for the county at our level with our grow ordinance? But collaborating with the city, not just the police department, but the other agencies involved, so that we are, again, consistent with our enforcement.